Well, since we were talking about radio and that's just a dying medium, even if you're paying for it, if you have a Sirius XM subscription.
Sure.
Well, iHeart Media, i.e. Clear Channel.
Yeah.
They filed for bankruptcy this week.
Yeah, I saw that.
It's like, geez. You know how much they have in outstanding debt?
It's like some crazy number, isn't it? Like $100 billion.
No, it's not quite like that. It's only 10% of that, but it's $10 billion.
Oh, is that all?
$10 billion.
$10 billion. Oof.
Can't even imagine that.
On a product that everybody acknowledges is just dying.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I mean, why anybody would invest in a radio station these days is beyond me.
Yeah, who knows?
Because, with all the other media available out there, be it iTunes or Google Play or, Spotify or whatever it is you're looking for, YouTube, why would you even bother with commercial radio?
And the thing that I don't get with iHeart is they've invested a shit ton of money into iHeart Radio, the online thing. I mean, we're even a part of it.
Yeah, the app.
Yeah, the app but more to the point, the stations themselves.
Mm-hmm.
There's like 1 million or 1,000 stations or however many stations there are. We have a channel on iHeart.
Yeah.
And that's great. But I cannot imagine why they do that. Why they invest, the money to keep it running on such a platform. And I mean, I know that they insert commercials and all that kind of shit, but they got to pay licensing for that. And I mean, you could go to iHeart, you could type in, whatever Dockin', and it'll bring up a station that plays Dockin'.
Mm-hmm.
So they got to be paying royalty money for that, because it's streaming. It's not, traditional radio that gets away with it. It's like, why would they invest in that? Doesn't that take away from their, it takes a shit ton of money to have a platform on the grand scale like they do. But at the same time, too, doesn't that take away from their own product of getting people to listen to their stations?
Well, see, this is what I don't understand. Where an iHeart app is concerned for commercial radio.
Yeah.
Who can't leave their area? Just put you, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Leave Cleveland and say you traveled to, I don't know,
Pittsburgh.
Well, I mean, let's go a little further out. Say you went to LA or something.
Okay.
Is it important for you to be able to tune into your local radio station in Cleveland to see what's going on?
No, not anymore.
I mean, why would you listen to commercial radio on a phone app or something like that? Why would you bother with that?
The only time, I'll give you the lone example I can think of that makes sense, is if your station of choice is sports. If you're a Cleveland sports person, the last thing you want to hear is the fucking breakdown on the Chargers. So you might be, if you're driving, you might tune in to listen to, your favorite talk show talking about, who the Browns picked up this week or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But musically, who gives a fuck? Weather. Well, if you're not there, then why do you need to know that it's going to be fucking snowy and 32? And you better avoid the fucking 271 southbound because there's an accident at Harvard and Lee or whatever. You don't need that. I don't know why. I don't. But again, and we talk about this all the time. You and I are kind of outside of the norm. We've never been locked into local ever.
Mm-mm.
And, and I mean, for me, when I had XM, when XM first came out, that was like heaven, because I could go from, point A to point B from Cleveland to Florida and never have to change the station. That was great for me. I mean, you remember, dude. I mean, you were a truck driver, for fuck's sake.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I didn't have that. That just came out or was available
No, I'm talking about the other way, though. As a truck driver, you remember the days of putting on a station and then it fading out.
Yeah, then you have to go find another
thing.
station. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was a big pain in the dick.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was a pain in the dick, and then you get into that one place that has nothing but 14 country stations, and your choices are Merle Haggard or Garth Brooks or fucking Shania, you know, and you're like, fuck, I got to listen to this for 45 minutes
Yeah.
until you drive through it. So, you know, XM on that level was better, and I would imagine iHeart or whatever now is the equivalent to that, the free equivalent to that. But I don't know, man. I don't understand why iHeart would put so much money into it now. Why they wouldn't just fucking kill that thing off and, you know, focus only on their own stations.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why is iHeart, and again, I'm not trying to shit on them, you know, because we have a station, and we do pretty decent on our station, actually. But why does Clear Channel or iHeart Media want to promote our station versus whatever they have that does what we do, or something close to what, you know, whatever shock jock radio show they have, you know, Bob and Tom or something on you know, in wherever, Toledo, wherever they would be. You know, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but
they're doing us the favor. They're not getting. We don't give them anything. We give them nothing for it except for content that people use their app. That's it.
Yeah.
So I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't quite get it anyway, but the largest U.S. radio company, iHeart Media, files for bankruptcy.
Right.
iHeart Media, Inc. filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on Thursday as the largest U.S. radio station owner reached an in-principle agreement with creditors to restructure its overwhelming debt load. The company, which filed for bankruptcy along with some of its units, said it reached an agreement with holders of more than $10 billion of outstanding debt for a balance sheet restructuring, which would reduce its debt by more than $10 billion.
That's a bit.
iHeartMedia, which was struggling with $20 billion of debt and falling revenue at its 858 radio stations, said cash on hand and cash generated from outgoing operations will be sufficient to fund the business during the bankruptcy process. The agreement is a significant accomplishment as it allows us to definitively address the more than $20 billion in debt that has burdened our capital structure.
Right.
$20 billion.
Jeez.
How do you get that far? How do you get that far in debt and go, you know, we really got to do something about this?
I can't even get to like 45 days late on my car before they fucking drive me crazy. How do you get fucking $20 billion in debt?
Yeah, I know. The filing comes after John Malone's Liberty Media proposed on February 26th a deal to buy 40% of the stake in a restructured iHeart Media for $1.16 billion. 40% for a 20th of their debt.
Yeah, that sucks. Why would you even do that?
Exactly. Uniting the company with Liberty's Sirius XM Holdings satellite radio service.
So what? They're going to merge those two?
Well, that's what it looks like. It looks like they wanted to buy in.
That makes no sense.
Clear Channel's subsidiary, Clear Channel Outdoor of iHeartMedia and one of the world's largest billboard companies, and its units did not commence Chapter 11 proceedings.
No.
iHeartMedia skipped a $106 million interest payment on February 1st. Interest, $106 million.
Is that all?
That's all. Triggering a 30-day grace period during which the company has tried to hammer out a deal with its bondholders. That's just interest.
Yeah.
The company disclosed on Monday it was still exchanging proposals with its creditors but had yet to reach an agreement. Its most recent proposal would have given holders a secured loan who are owed nearly $13 billion. about $5.6 billion in new debt and 94% of the equity in recognized iHeart Media.
Wow.
The creditors also would have received iHeart Media's 89.5% stake in Clear Channel Outdoor Holdings.
So that's what, venues?
That's the billboards and advertising.
Okay.
They own a bunch of billboards out there.
They own venues or no?
I don't know if they own the venues or if they own the licensing to the venues.
Like the naming rights or something?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Bain Capital and Thomas H. Lee Partners controlled 68% of the voting stock of iHeart Media, according to the company's most recent annual report. The private equity firm, firms led a $17.9 billion leveraged buyout of what was then Clear Channel Communications in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Just as the buyout boom was fading and the signs of the financial crisis began to emerge.
Wow.
So during the big financial crush that we had, they basically lost their whole investment in that.
The funny thing is that they basically went to shit at the same time that satellite radio kind of blew up.
Mm-hmm.
And then satellite radio went to shit. Now there's nothing left.
Yeah.
Now it's all podcasts. Isn't that amazing that podcasts have really kind of just dismantled fucking radio?
Well, because it's free content.
Yeah. It's free content and it's uncensored.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit what the government wants. It's fucking no one wants to hear censored horse shit anymore.
And a bunch of commercials in between.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what though, dude, and I'll be honest with the commercials. I don't necessarily hate that as much as maybe the next guy does, as long as you don't fucking front load them. I hate to always throw Eddie Trunk under the fucking bus, but he's just the first example I could think of. When you listen to his podcast, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, I thoroughly enjoy his podcast. Or Rogan as well. Rogan's another one, so that way I'm not just picking on Eddie. But when you listen to either of those, before you even get started, you got to go through fucking commercials. And it's like, dude, just stop. If you want it at the end, if you give me, 60 minutes of content and at the end of the thing, you throw a commercial on the end or whatever, that's okay. I listen to the local guys that do local sports here.
Mm-hmm.
The shows they have segments from their shows on podcast, and I listen to that because really I can't stand listening to the fucking retards that call, because a bunch of fucking dude, the Browns are going to go 12-4 this year because they signed fucking Tyrod Taylor. It's like I can't deal with that. It's too much stupidity. But I can deal with when they're talking to the field experts or the experts from the different towns that are talking about, actual sports. I can deal with that. So I download their podcasts. And they're a CBS thing. It's through CBS. And at the end of each thing, it's like 15 minutes of interview or whatever, of discussion. And then at the very end of each, there's a commercial tagged on the end for the podcast, and that's fine, and that's good. And I'll be honest, I listen through it most of the time. I don't fucking race while I'm driving to fucking push a button to jump off of, a commercial for, the next window company or whatever that's promoting their shit. I just let it go until the next thing goes. So I still hear it. I just like, I'll give you another example, and this is one I know you don't know, and a lot of these are sports talk things, but do you know who Ross Tucker is?
I don't.
He's a ex-football player, and he has about 15 different podcasts out there. He's one of these guys that works with the NFL, and he's on the sideline during TV broadcasts and whatnot. Well, he has a football podcast just called the Ross Report. And I get his podcast as well during the season. This fucking guy, his podcast is almost unlistenable if you let it go just let it go. Thank God I use the Downcast app that has little buttons on the top where you can just pick either 30 seconds, 60 seconds, or 2 minutes to fast forward.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because, I mean, he'll do 10 minutes of fucking commercials before he gets started. And it's like, you know, he'll come on and he'll do like, hey, it's Ross, and I'm out here in Green Bay today. Speaking of Green Bay, let me tell you about fucking Wisconsin cheese. And, you know, it's like, oh, my God. I can't even fucking get in to hear the goddamn football. Just fucking tell me. Put all these commercials on the end, and I'll listen to some of them. You know, so, I don't know. Podcasting is, I mean, you can put commercials on it, and I don't think it's as big of a deal as people might make it to be. I mean, sure, in a perfect world, we'd all like to have everything be free and not have to deal with any of that kind of shit. But, you know, I mean, everybody's got commerce needs, I guess, and, you know, commercials are part of it, but it just doesn't have to be overwhelming. When it's overwhelming, you don't want to listen to it anymore.
That's
you
true.
know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite, you know, talk shows that I listen to pretty regularly is Mark Levin.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, his show is on late in the afternoon or early evening.
Right.
And by the time his show is over, somebody out there, I don't know who, but his show is uploaded onto YouTube.
Sure.
Within an hour after the show ends.
Right. And
I just go to YouTube, pull up Mark Levin, and listen to his show commercial free because they take the commercials out and everything.
Yeah, it's. I think it's his podcasting company because his show is available on podcast as well without commercials.
Yeah, so I listen to the Mark Levin show when I'm going to bed. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I put it on and listen to the show that just broadcast within the last hour or so.
Yeah, but if you listen to that and at the end of it, it had like 2 minutes of commercials on the end, that wouldn't bother you, would it?
No, not at all. But the one that's uploaded on YouTube has no commercials.
Sure,
none.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, even our show on Spreaker, it runs a commercial at the end of the podcasts, and I know most people don't listen to it. And I don't really give a shit. You know, it runs it out there, and you know, maybe every 6 months we get $50 or something.
Right.
I don't know what it is, but you know, I mean, it makes a nickel or a quarter nickel or whatever. I don't know what it pays, but it you know, it's there, but it's not intrusive. Remember when I first fucking turned it on, it was intrusive, and I adjusted it so that it wouldn't be so intrusive. But you know, I mean, it's part of the game, I guess.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, getting back to iHeart Media.
Mm-hmm.
Shares of iHeart Media lost 3/4 of their value in the second half of 2015 and have never recovered since. On Monday, the pink sheet stock closed at 48 cents.
Right.
48 cents a share.
Yeah, it seems those people that work there have to be just fucking killing themselves that they invested in the company.
Right.
And they probably did think, oh, this company will never fucking go bad.
Yeah, of course.
Big giant entity like this, what could happen? Guess what? Now you lost all your fucking money.
Yep.
Oof.
iHeart Media traces its roots to the 1972 purchase of KEEZ-FM in San Antonio, Texas, where it's currently headquartered. It also produces syndicated radio programs that feature American Idol host Ryan Seacrest,
right,
and political personalities Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity.
Well,
the company had 14,300 employees at the end of 2016, according to its most recent annual report. So,
how long do you give them?
They'll end up just piecing mealing that out.
You think?
Yeah, because I'm going to do a little follow up here.
Okay.
And this is in direct relation to this deal.
Mm-hmm.
But Chicago is the third largest radio market in the nation.
Sure.
And the radio stations here in Chicago are just falling by the wayside.
Like closing?
Yeah, well, they're being parted out and just, you know, they're struggling to stay relevant.
Okay.
Due to the digital age. But if you weren't aware, if you're not familiar with Chicago radio, one of the longest running rock stations out there, the Loop,
right,
was sold to a Christian radio station.
Mm-hmm.
So the Loop rock station is gone.
Yeah, that's a pretty big loss.
That's huge. The Loop is gone. Stations are bankrupt, and Chicago radio is struggling to stay relevant in the digital age.
Wow.
So in the third largest market in the nation, radio is doing nothing. Commercial radio.
Yeah.
Chicagoans have had their clock radio set to WLUP FM 97.9. Maybe in for a rude awakening. Wonder what that could be.
Mm-hmm.
Saturday, as songs like AC/DC's Highway to Hell give way to Jesus I Believe by Big Daddy Weave.
Big Daddy Weave making an appearance. How about that?
The top songs this week on K-Love, the station's new Christian pop format.
Oh, God.
So it went from AC/DC's Highway to Hell, WLUP, to now K-Love.
K-Love.
Yeah.
And here it is. It's Mercy Me with I Can Only Imagine.
Yeah. Now here's some Petra.
Petra.
Yeah.
Here's what you've been waiting for, that new one from Jars of Clay.
Yeah. Here's Sandy Patty.
Just yuck.
Yeah. Welcome to the Chicago airwaves circa 2018. Hitting the snooze button won't bring Styx, Van Halen, or Led Zeppelin back to the Loop, which has ended a 40-year run as an iconic classic rock station.
Boy.
On Tuesday, owner Merlin Media announced it's selling WLUP to Educational Media Foundation, a California-based religious broadcaster, for $21.5 million.
That's not even that much money, really.
Not really. Not for a third market radio station on the low end of the dial.
Yeah.
Or the
middle.
middle.
The number one station in Chicago, right, at the time?
It has. It's competed for the number one slot.
Yeah, I was gonna say, at the time of the transfer, was there a bigger station in Chicago than the Loop?
Not rock station, no.
Wow. Yeah, that's a fucking crazy move there.
Well, how bad is it when rock music can't be profitable anymore?
Yeah, that is true. Well,
but when you're only playing the same 40 songs over and over and over and over again, it gets kind of old and stale.
Are you telling me that you don't like hearing Us and Them by Pink Floyd every 30 minutes?
As much as I love Van Halen, you can only hear Running with the Devil so many times.
Come on, dude. Sweet Home Alabama, man. It's a good one. Can't say that I've heard it in the last 30 minutes.
Right. The foundation is taking over WLUP's programming through an affiliation agreement while the sale awaits approval from the Federal Communications Commission. The Loop provided the long-running soundtrack for a generation of Chicagoans. Its swan song represents the end of an era as a traditional radio struggles to stay relevant, and in some cases solvent, in the face of digital competition.
Right.
I.e. the classic metal show.
Right. So what would a Chicago person listen to? I mean, I don't know the options. What are the options now that they have if you're a rock fan in Chicago?
I guess they would listen to The Drive.
Okay. What is that? I don't know what that is.
It's a pre-programmed radio station that plays a variety of music, but most of it is rock-based.
Oh, is it one of those Jack stations?
Yeah, exactly.
That you might be listening to Van Halen, but then it'll play some pop song or something?
I don't think they go that extreme.
Okay.
It stays pretty much, you might hear Van Halen, but then you might hear Huey Lewis.
That's a good mix.
Well, that's kind of what I'm going for. I mean, it's not in the same. It's not the traditional Zeppelin, Van Halen, Pink Floyd only. It's like Zeppelin, Huey Lewis, maybe a Chicago song, back to some Zeppelin, to
Yeah, we had, I don't know if we still do, but we had one of those here. I think it was called The Lake.
Okay.
And it was the same thing. But the funny thing was they never had actual DJs. It was all voice-tracked horse shit.
Well, that's what this is.
But it wasn't even voice-tracked by like a voice. It was voice-tracked by like a bit voice, one of those guys with the wacky voice.
Uh-huh.
And he was always like, oh, you want to hear that? We'll play that. And, just shitty, bad fucking production. And then they would always advertise that on Wednesdays, you can pick the songs. It's like, get the fuck out of here. With no DJ to even talk up what was picked, there's nobody picking the song.
Right.
But you'd have rubes probably going to their fucking website and just voting, going to a dead email box somewhere.
Yep.
Just stupid.
Yeah.
But somehow people believe that shit, don't they?
They still believe. Yeah, they do. They still think radio stations take requests.
Yeah. They think that, well, you know what? I request, and they'll request something that's common. They'll be like, you know what? I'm going to request John Cougar, Jack and Diane. And in 45 minutes or an hour and a half or 3 hours later, that song will come on because that's the John Cougar song that would get played anyway.
Right.
And they're like, see, they played my request, man. Fuck yeah, cool. So stupid.
Yeah. Nearly a dozen Chicago radio stations are run by owners in or on the brink of bankruptcy.
Wow. As
listeners and ad dollars migrate to streaming platforms like Pandora and Spotify.
Mm-hmm.
So people aren't listening to commercial radio. Why would you?
Yeah. What's the purpose?
Yeah.
But even like Pandora, I mean, you listen to Pandora sometimes, don't you? Or no,
I'm pretty much straight Spotify.
Okay. Well, on Pandora, unless you have a paid account, I've been known to do Pandora in the car because they do a better mix than Apple Music does when you do the radio player.
Okay.
But if you listen to it in the car, they play a commercial every 4 or 5 songs or whatever, but it's not annoying. It's like, okay, I caught 6 songs kind of like Chevy Van by Sammy Johns. So I'm good for a fucking 30-second commercial, and then they go right back and play 6 more songs. It's not the thing that the online streamers have gotten is that not being overwhelming with it is going to keep people listening longer.
Mm-hmm.
And so far, they have not ruined that yet. Now, will they eventually? They probably will. But, as of today, that has not happened. So, we'll see.
Radio's product offering and business model is under attack, said Larry Miller, a radio veteran and director of Steinhardt Music Business Program at the New York University. It is facing very stiff competition from digital services that didn't exist a decade ago.
Right.
Miller wrote a report painting a bleak picture for radio's future as the car dashboard once the exclusive province of AM and FM radio stations taps into the world of digital platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you can listen to your Spotify and Google Play and all that stuff inside your newer cars now.
Yeah. Yeah, not even super new cars. I mean, I don't have a new car anymore. Mine's a 2013, but it's got the Bluetooth in it. I think that's a standard feature now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So as long as you have music on your phone, which damn near everybody has the ability to do that now, as long as you have music on your phone, you don't need to listen to the radio anymore. It's all part of the bigger plan, which is to fucking isolate everybody, man. Because I don't know if you feel this way. I do sometimes. Do you feel like you get isolated a little bit from what's going on day to day just because you've cut your interaction with the outside world by a lot?
Well, I agree with that. Absolutely.
I know I have, because I don't know, like, even 10 years ago, I'll say, and I don't know if you were this guy or not, but I was, and you could say if you were or not. 10 years ago, I was still that kind of 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock news guy, that I would settle in and watch the local news, to know what was going on in town, in Cleveland or whatever. And I I don't know what the fuck is ever going on in Cleveland. And I live here. But I don't watch any local news. I don't listen to any local radio. And I take that back. The local radio that I do listen to is on podcasts in the car that cuts out all of the fucking nonsense. So for me, I outside of my house, I don't know what the fuck is going on anymore. Do you?
Not really, no.
Are you the same way, though?
Yeah,
10 years ago, were you a news guy?
No, I never really followed local news that closely, because there was a time, and my current residence here, this is the longest that I've stayed in that one place. I've always been on the move, and just from place to place, and I never really got that involved or that attached to the local whatever was going on.
Right.
Never did.
Yeah. I mean, I always used to, but now I just don't care, because quite honestly, I think most of the people in my local are a bunch of fucking dick fucks. So I don't give a fuck if they're killing each other, to be perfectly honest.
Right. Traditional radio is in danger of becoming irrelevant to new generation of listeners. Well, I think we're past that point already.
No, when was this article written? 8 years ago?
No, just 2 days ago.
But that statement is an 8-year-old statement, clearly.
Yeah, it's in danger of becoming. No, it is here.
Yeah, it's here. People that are in their 20s, they don't have any fucking allegiance to a radio station like we used to.
Mm-mm.
Most of them probably couldn't name a radio station. They don't listen to radio.
Unless it's the mix or something like that.
Even that, they don't do that anymore. They go to YouTube.
Yeah.
They go to YouTube and they watch bits. See, that's the whole different generation now, is even shows are kind of passe. Even art, like what we do. The live show, there's a reason that our live show does 1/10 of what the podcast does. And that's because the live show requires you to commit. The podcast, you can catch short little bites. You don't have to listen for 6 hours. You can listen for 20 minutes and then move about your day. And then maybe when you're driving home from work, you catch another 20 minutes. But that's the modern age. The modern age is not about committing to a show. I mean, dude, when I was a kid and, would listen to the radio, even when it wasn't talk radio, when it was just music stations, if there was certain DJs on that I liked, I would listen. I would be at my whatever with the radio on from the time they started to the time they ended. There was a station here, the old 98.5, which was like a pop rock station, I guess. In the 80s, WGCL. Were you here for that?
Yeah, WGCL.
You remember GCL? And they had Dancin' Danny Wright?
Yeah.
Well, I was a big fan of Dancin' Danny Wright. And I know he was playing all the same shit that all the other DJs were playing, but I was a Dancin' Danny Wright fan. So I would listen I think his show was from 3 to 7. And I would listen to Dancin' Danny Wright on WGCL. And then I would flip back over to MMS and listen to whatever was going on MMS after that. But, that was how it was in the old days, was you had a attachment to the show, the people, whatever. That's gone.
Yep.
That day is over. And they keep trying to do it like what they were trying to do with like the Sixth Sense, but they don't try to do it organically. They don't let Nicky sit in a studio and fucking do his show. They just have him voice track a bunch of shit to where it feels disauthentic or not authentic. And, it's not true, and people know it, so they don't get attached to it anymore.
Well, and the thing is that all started when I was in radio school, when I went to broadcasting school.
Sure.
When I went to broadcasting school, the first thing that they taught us is that commercial radio, was not looking for quote-unquote personality radio. They're looking for personable radio.
Right.
And one of the biggest deals is getting back to your point about Dancin' Danny Wright. This guy had a name. and he had a following, which obviously you enjoyed his way that he presented the music. Well, what happened was these radio stations would get wise to this, which is why they started with the cue cards, and you have to read on the script and all that shit. You couldn't be the free form guy to just say what was on your mind. Well, when you became a name in radio and your contract was up, that gave you negotiating power because you now had a presence or a name, or you're a personality now.
Yeah.
So when you became a personality and had a following, they were obligated to pay your contract, or if they're going to renew your contract, they have to deal with you as a personality now.
Right.
Not just as some guy playing music. And they didn't want that. So they were getting smart to it and go, no, you read off the cue cards, you stick to the script, you don't, veer off from this, you read this on the hour, or whatever, and you don't make the show your own. You're just here as a voice.
Yeah. Well, dude, when I was doing the metal show on, not so much MMS, but when we moved over to 92.3, that gave the fact that we were a name, and I mean, you remember, for a lot of our fans that are not from Cleveland and or just younger and don't remember, the metal show was pretty big.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't just that specialty show that everybody has in their town. It had a very big following, and if it was metal in Cleveland, me and Matt were the guys, and we were like the only corporate guys, quote unquote corporate guys. But I personally made a name for myself by being outrageous. Imagine that. And when I would get in trouble, when I would do stuff that was clearly fireable offenses, they couldn't fire me because I had built a bigger name for myself and it was attached to their station. And they were billing so much money that they couldn't just say, okay, fuck you, you're out, and we're going to replace you with the next guy. They couldn't do it as much as they probably wanted to. I mean, I've told these stories many times on the air about how I was constantly called into the program director's fucking office on Mondays to get yelled at about, well, you can't say this, and you can't say that about the fucking advertisers and blah, 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 blah. But they couldn't fire me because of exactly what you're saying. I built a name for myself on the station instead of just being a faceless, nameless rube that was playing Slipknot.
Exactly.
And they had to deal with it. And they dealt with me probably at least a year longer than they wanted to. And then when they did fired me, they had to kill the whole fucking show because they knew they couldn't just replace me with another guy because it wasn't going to work, and they knew it, so they canned the whole show. So yeah, they give up that power, when you do build a name. That's why guys like Opie and Anthony are such a weird entity, because they came up in that era but built a name for themselves anyway. They were probably the last of it, don't you think?
I would think so, yeah.
And they were lucky enough to turn that into major profitability for themselves. But I think after that, commercial radio, and I think especially after Stern, when Stern walked, they didn't want to have any other big shows anymore.
Nope.
Because they couldn't control it. Howard Stern, those radio stations hated having Howard Stern on their stations.
Well, they did. I remember when Howard came here to Chicago, when he was still in the, syndicating his show, and he came here to Chicago. I believe he was on the Loop on the AM side.
Okay.
And they broadcast the Howard Stern show, and it lasted, I think, like a week or two, and they cut the cord on it because they didn't like his delivery.
Right. Yeah, they hated having him, but once he got to a big enough level, there was nothing they could do about it. Like here, he was on 98.5 here, WNCX. And I know for a fact from talking to people in the building, because we shared the building, they hated when he was on. They hated that they had to give up that block, and they hated that, they couldn't do like local stuff at 6, during morning drive. They hated all of that stuff. And then he wouldn't end exactly at 10. Sometimes he would go till 10:45.
Yeah.
They couldn't plan anything. I remember sitting in meetings and they would talk about how frustrating it was as a station because they literally couldn't plan to do anything before noon, because the fact that Howard wouldn't end at 10 meant that they couldn't schedule anything for that hour till 11. And then nobody wanted to be a guest right up against that show, because the minute that show finally did go off, they lost something like 50%.
Yep, they tuned out right away.
Yeah, they tuned right out, because what would they do? After a 5-hour talk show, they would play 25 minutes of fucking commercials, and everybody would leave. So then what are you going to do? Do you want to be the advertiser that spends money to talk about your festival this weekend coming up at 11 o'clock? Here's Bob's gas station talking about Gas Fest or whatever. Nobody wanted to do that. So it killed the station until afternoon just by having Stern. Now Stern would generate every goddamn ear in the town, but he didn't give a fuck about Cleveland, so he wasn't helping them. He wasn't helping the station, other than they could sell their percentage of advertising for Stern. It was a weird time, and I could tell you for a fact, sitting in on those meetings, it wasn't like the stations loved having Howard Stern. They loved having the attention that came with Howard Stern
and generating the revenue.
Yeah, what it was they could bill, when you had a show that was that dominant and was number one in the market always, and no other morning show could overtake it, then they could bill out the rest of the day. That's how the advertising and the marketing got working, was they would say, okay, well, we're going to sell you an advertising package for $2,500. And for $2,500, you're going to get 20 spots from 2 to 7 and 1 spot a month for the Howard Stern time. And the advertisers would do it. And that's how they would raise the rate. They would jack the rate up for the rest of the time, because they would get that one sweet spot ad on Howard that normally would cost them $5,000. Well, they would get it for $2,500, and then they would get 19 other spots during the week that otherwise they would not pay for.
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's like it's an incentive.
Yeah.
Here, buy this package. We'll throw one of your commercials in during the hottest, broadcast time on the dial. Yeah,
because and while I'm sure a lot of our audience probably doesn't know a lot about TV and radio advertising, they could probably relate to this. If you've ever watched an NFL game, whatever NFL game you're watching, you'll be watching, and most of the game is all national commercials. It's all Ford trucks.
Because they can afford it.
Yeah, but there's always one section in each half of every game with 2 commercials that are straight local. It's the local lawyer, ambulance chaser guy. And then it's the biggest local pizza shop in town or something. But you always notice that one time, and it's because the national has to give it, and I forget what the law is on it, but they have to give X amount of local coverage per broadcast segment. So they sell 1 or 2 commercials per broadcast that are strictly for the local. And that's what the same thing was going on with the Stern Show, was they had to give X amount of commercial time to the local stations. So our local station, NCX, would sell those spots for a premium, and they would use it to jack the cost. They wouldn't give it. You could not just buy that Stern time. You could not just buy that. you had to buy a package that would advertise you through the rest of the broadcast day. And that's how they fucking dicked you into advertising. It was a whole thing, man. It's not as easy as you might think.
Yeah, it's pretty complicated.
Yep.
Listenership is declining and aging a little bit every year, Miller said. Younger people are discovering and consuming music in other places. These places include streaming services with customized playlists, podcasts, YouTube videos, Apple's iTunes, all of which are integrated and connected through the car systems such as Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. California-based Pandora rolled out its service in 2005, offering listeners a personalized digital radio experience over the internet. Last year, the publicity-traded streaming services generated nearly $1.5 billion in revenue, with about 75 million active listeners, according to the financial documents. So Pandora is making $1.5 billion a year, while radio is claiming bankruptcy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what's Pandora's overhead? Some servers and some bandwidth?
Pretty much.
And licensing? Pandora's doing it smart. They're not building they're not building a bloated fucking nonsensical. I mean, don't. Am I crazy in looking at this and thinking, though, that they just do stupid shit with their money? Like, wasn't last week or the week before the iHeart Awards?
I don't know about that.
I believe in the last week or two was the iHeart Awards. And on its face, I mean, yeah, that doesn't cost a lot of money to put on an award show. But you got to pay all these goddamn guests.
Mm-hmm.
You got to pay all these guests to come in for what? To stroke your dick that they're playing your stuff on iHeartRadio? I mean, what is that? If you're in financial hell, why are you having an award show? That just sounds like wasted money, doesn't it?
Well, you got to be self-congratulatory in some way or another, I guess.
I guess, but to me, that just sounds like, they're this many millions and millions of dollars in debt. Okay, well, there's one place you could fucking cut it. Cut that debt right there. Stop naming buildings for fucking $24 million a year for the privilege of having concerts held at the iHeart Center or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's just stupid.
I agree.
It's ridiculous.
Spotify, based in Sweden, had 159 million active users and generated about $5 billion in revenue in 2017, according to a registration form filed last month with the Securities and Exchange Commission in advance of an initial public offering.
Right.
So Spotify made $5 billion.
$5 billion, wow.
Yeah, both Pandora and Spotify offer free and subscription services. While neither company is profitable, they have been taking a bite out of the traditional radio revenue, which has been stagnant for several years.
Right.
Over-the-air radio revenue peaked at about $18 billion in 2006. But
surprised it was doing that good that late.
Yeah, $18 billion in 2006. That's almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, not quite, but it's 12 years ago.
12 years ago.
Yeah. But it fell precipitously during the Great Recession and has never really recovered. While the radio industry is seeing some growth online, advertisers' over-the-air revenue remains flat, generating about $14.1 billion in 2016.
Right.
The challenging economics have left the nation's two largest radio chains drowning in debt and facing financial reorganization. Atlanta-based Cumulus Media, the nation's second largest radio chain, in number of stations, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in November. And Chicago's Cumulus owns WLS-AM 890, WLS-FM 94.7, and operates WKQX-FM 101. And until the end of Friday, they had WLUP.
Right.
But, they've fallen off.
Right.
Meanwhile, iHeart Media, the nation's largest radio chain, declared bankruptcy on Thursday. After creditors extended the deadline to avoid default, the Texas-based radio chain owns 7 radio stations in the Chicago market, including WVAZ, WLIT-FM, WKSC-FM, that is KISS-FM 103.5.
Right. Well, and they're going to keep losing money, dude. They can try any spin that they want to, but the validity of what radio was for in the first place is gone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's no DJs anymore that, you know, that are personalities, and so nobody cares about that. You know, nobody listens to hear personality radio anymore. That's the first thing. Musically, radio has long since stopped being the place where music is quote unquote broken anymore. You know, it's all broken where? Like on YouTube or wherever. Or nowhere, because there's none being broken, really. The online thing, for both of those platforms, the online thing is just better. It's better, it's easier, and it makes more sense. I mean, you can find quality talent that's been completely overlooked by radio on podcasts. You know, and it doesn't have to be the big names. It doesn't have to be Adam Carolla or Rogan or those kind of guys that are, you know, somewhat radio proficient because they have radio backgrounds in the past. It could be, you know, a smaller station with local guys that are just passionate about music or politics or whatever. So you can get all of that. Then you've got all these other organizations out there for music. If you want tried and true music, like you were saying, you can go to Spotify, you can go to Apple Music, you can go to Pandora, you can go to Google Play, whoever. You know, those avenues are out there. If you want stuff that's new or unsigned or whatever, you can always go to like Songcast. You can go to Songcast and hear a bunch of shit that you would never hear otherwise, and you might discover something new. You know, so the relevance of radio, I don't know how they, you know, justify from what you're saying with the reorganization. They seem to think that there's some way they're going to be able to come back.
Yeah, that's the other part I don't understand. It's what are you going to do different now?
Yeah, because
that's going to make you profitable.
Because in the end, people have said loud and clear, what you do is no longer what we want. But they're not offering any. They're offering all kinds of ways to shift the money around through bankruptcy and backdoor deals with advertising and blah. But they're not offering anything that's going to make radio any more listenable.
Mm-mm.
No one, you know, there's not one thing that says, well, what we're going to do is we're going to build a personality-based show, and we're going to do 4 hours a day, and then, I don't know, give you a free 2-hour broadcast of them uncensored once a week. Now that might work its way into something. You think, like, if they did like you know, like sort of a Howard, it doesn't have to be Howard Stern, but like that type of a show where they could do like a 3-hour a day Howard Stern type thing, but then maybe on their digital platform have another podcast of an extra hour of the show every day.
Well, that's what Steve Dahl does currently.
And that's probably works well for him.
Yeah, he does his radio show in Afternoon Drive.
Sure.
And they put out a podcast, he and his crew.
Sure.
Do an hour or so podcast prior to the show.
Right. And that you would think that would work well, but I would think you go the other way, where you can tease it, where you can build it up, and maybe, you know, over the course of your show, you know, over the course of what you're doing for those 2, 3, 4 hours, whatever, during the day, during the broadcast, you can lead up to it. And then as you go off, you say, hey, you know, join us now over on the uncensored version.
Which is, and I misspoke how I meant that. What I meant is prior to going on the air, they record a podcast together since they're all in the station together.
Right.
And then during the live show on the commercial radio station, they do exactly what you say.
Yeah.
Don't forget to check out the podcast today because we're going to be talking about blah, 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 blah.
Right. And you would develop the personalities again, And at the same time, you would develop, extra ways to make revenue with that show. But they don't want to hear that because that's too much work for their fucking people.
Mm-hmm.
And they've gotten so out of touch with what people want to hear that they just don't think on that level anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's crazy, but there are ways that they could make their product more relevant. They just choose not to.
Yeah. Fred Jacobs, founder and president of Michigan-based Jacobs Media. Is that who Jacobs Field is named after?
No, I don't think so.
The nation's largest rock radio consulting firm.
Right.
They're a consulting firm for rock radio.
Okay.
Yeah, play some Skynyrd, man.
Yeah. You know what would help your station? A little bit more Pink Floyd.
Yeah. I think you should play Led Zeppelin, The Immigrant Song, at 5 minutes after 12 every day.
Yeah. Our studies have found at 4:20 every day, that's when you got to play Eruption, because that'll make people erupt into their weed smoking minute.
Mm-hmm.
Stop. Fucking radio. We had this fucking radio consultant guy, and he was like the biggest name guy named Oedipus. And this fucking guy, he came and evaluated all of our shows on the station. And it was funny because he said the only show that was worth a shit was the metal show.
Right.
But it was the only show that wasn't, streamlined toward their toward traditional radio. We just did whatever the fuck we wanted to do, and it was the only show he said was good. And then you know what changes came out of it? None. The station didn't change 1 ounce based on that. We still kept doing what we were doing, and the rest of the station still sounded exactly the fucking same. So stupid. Why did they pay this guy probably $10,000 to come in for a week?
Right.
Dumb.
Anyway, getting back to Fred Jacobs, he said the industry is still in pretty good shape. Really? It's in pretty good shape.
For him to keep making money.
Yeah, despite the high-profile bankruptcies and ongoing erosion from digital competition.
Right.
Okay, this is his big input here.
Okay.
People look at those two companies and say that's the state of the radio industry. Well, that kind of is like 70% of it.
Yeah.
But in reality, but the reality is, in a market like Chicago, there's a lot of other companies doing quite well.
Who?
I don't know. Jacobs pointed out to his client Hubbard Radio, whose Chicago stations include WTMX-FM, The Mix, just like I said,
right,
and WDRV, The Drive.
Okay.
They're thriving in their current environment.
Okay, which is what? DJ lacking jukebox radio?
Pretty much.
Yeah, that's great.
He said the emotion connected with the loop's demise contributes to the perception, particularly in Chicago, that the industry is in a downward spiral. It is.
Yeah.
Jacob said the station that listeners are mourning went away a long time ago. Nostalgia is a powerful force, and the loop had a lot of that going on for it, he said. The FM frequency at 97.9 signed on in the 1950s as WEHS and morphed into the rhythm and blues outlet WHFC in 1963 under Leonard Chess, the legendary Chicago record company executive. In subsequent incarnation, WSDM shifted to jazz and rock, at one point featuring an all-female air staff.
Okay.
WLUP launched in 1977, and the station quickly became the place where Chicago rocks, which was emblazoned on black loop T-shirts worn by an army of passionate listeners.
Mm-hmm.
While morning man Steve Dahl personified the irreverence that shattered the norms of Chicago radio, afternoon drive host Sky Daniels was all about the music. When I first got there, the whole idea was to bring rock and roll attitude to the airwaves, Daniels said, who now runs a non-commercial Los Angeles rock station. So non-commercial rock station.
So he's on an LP station somewhere.
Yeah, that's it.
Right.
They really encouraged us to go deep and to break all the rules, and we did.
Yeah.
Daniel's tenure at the Loop spanned from 1979 to 1985, and he's also served as assistant programmer as the format took off. The Loop scored its highest ratings in the summer of 1979, almost 40 years ago.
Yeah, 40 years ago.
With a 7.3 share, placing at third among all stations. The summer of 1979, everywhere we went, everything we did, there were 5,000 people showing up, Daniel said. The station had a hold on the marketplace, particularly with 16 to 24-year-olds.
Right.
The most notorious moment in the station history came in July of 1979 when the fans stormed the field at Comiskey Park during Disco Demolition Night, a promotion where Steve Dahl blew up disco records between the games of a doubleheader at a Detroit Tigers, forcing the White Sox to forfeit the second game. Nostalgia for the Loop was in full force on Friday as Dahl, who currently hosts Afternoon Drive on WLS AM 890, simulcast his show on the Loop for a farewell broadcast. Meanwhile, the station had a run on black Loop t-shirts, selling 3,000 online at $20 a pop by Friday afternoon.
Well, that's nice.
Daniels said that the new owners, WLUP, may have a hard time inspiring listeners to degree the Loop once. They may have a hard time inspiring listeners to the degree the Loop once did. The impact of the Loop had on their sensibilities was profound, Daniel said. It really made them true believers in rock and roll. It really did create a generation of true believers.
Yeah, well, first of all, the Christian rock people or Christian whatever people that took it over, they know full well that the same people that were listening to the Loop last week are not going to be their audience.
No, that's not going to be their audience.
They're not expecting Van Halen people to fucking come over and hear the soothing sounds of Mercy Me.
Yeah, come on, give it a try.
Yeah, try it. It's great.
You might be surprised. You might like it.
Yeah, that's not going to happen, and they know that going in. You know, they bought the position. They didn't buy anything else. They want nothing to do with the Loop. They want nothing to do with anything else but 95.9 or whatever the station is. You know, that's all they want is that. But isn't it ironic? The Loop's greatest point was when they had personality-based radio.
Exactly. You're absolutely right.
And even now, or up until when did it end? Last week?
Last Friday,
up until it ended, what was their most popular show? Wasn't it Man Cow?
Yeah, that was the most recent popular show, yes.
And what is that? Personality-based radio. And that was the most popular on that station. You know, if you go outside of Chicago, and I mean, you've lived in a couple of different places, dude, when you look at the stations today that were the most popular anywhere you've lived, like, I don't know what was most popular in California, what, KNAC or something?
Yeah, KNAC with, what was the name of that show? It was two guys. It was kind of like Bob and Tom, but
it was personality-based radio.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then when they got rid of that, they ended up online fucking, gone, right?
Yeah.
And you look at MMS right now. MMS was the number one station in the country at one point when they were personality-based radio. When it was, I can't even think of the names of them, anymore, the guys that did it. But when it was personality-based radio, they were number one. Now, I mean, MMS does not have nearly the clout that it had back then, and they were the biggest in the world, and now they're just a station that doesn't resonate with anybody. It's just kind of the changes that corporate radio has made has killed their industry. And even reading everything that you just read and the two stories that you just read in there, they don't get it, that what they're doing is not what people want. And that's the reason they're fucking bankrupt, and that's the reason that no matter what they do to reposition, it's going to keep failing. Because people have actual legitimate options. Whether you forget us, I don't even want to put us in the mix. But if you like music, classic rock music, most people are going to look for it online. They're going to go to Apple and they're going to look up, or on iTunes rather, and they're going to look up podcasts and they're going to grab Decibel Geek or Eddie Trunk podcast or Talk to Me or whatever the fuck it is that they're going to grab, because they can get what they're looking for. It's personality based, and it's clearly not this paid for horse shit that we're all sick of being spoon fed. And until these radio companies get that, they're going to keep on failing. I don't care what they do to try and reorganize. They're going to keep failing. Don't you think?
I would believe so.
Yeah, just a mess.
Yeah, the show that I was thinking of was on KLOS. It was the Mark and Brian show.
Oh, yeah, Mark and Brian. I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they had a big fight with Stern, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they were one of those big ones that Stern took on and fucking beat.
Yep.
Stern beat everybody.
Well, I mean, when the Mark and Brian were the morning kings, and when Stern was syndicated into L.A., it became the big fight.
Yeah. Because
when Stern came here to Chicago, Mancow was the big one.
Yeah, and he mowed him over too.
And he beat him to death, and so every market that he came into, they all had local radio morning shows.
Yeah,
that were very popular, and Stern basically knocked them out of the ballpark.
Yeah, I still remember the Grease Man. Remember that?
Oh yeah, the Grease Man. He was in Philadelphia, I believe.
That was like the best one of all the Stern ones. Is when Stern knocked out the Grease Man.
Yeah,
because he fucking killed that guy. I mean, he killed that guy. But yeah, those were good days. But now there's nobody. There's nobody left. Even Stern. Stern sucks now. He's terrible. And that's the saddest part of them all, is the guy that fucking wrecked it for everybody. Now he's lousy. That's like absolutely depressing. I know you have not. Do you even listen to YouTube clips of him anymore?
No, not anymore. No.
Dude, it's just so sad, In the old days, I mean, you loved when he just fucking destroyed celebrities for being douchey. And now he's like, yeah, we were in the Hamptons and we're hanging out with Jimmy Kimmel. And it's like, dude, really? What happened to you? That money fucking took him completely. He became a billionaire and just became a douchebag in the process. Just pathetic.
Yep. All right. Well, that's where we are with the radio deal.
There we go. Wow, 2 hours of talking.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, since you were talking about Howard Stern and hanging out in the Hamptons and all this and that, and how it's killed radio and everything's done.
Yeah.
I thought I'd play some Bombay Black.
Okay.
And I think this is an appropriate tune here. This one comes from their Walk of Shame release.
All right.
And this one is called Superstar Dumb.
Nice.
So it's Bombay Black exclusively here
on your classic metal show.